The scandal did not begin with a single explosive broadcast. It began with whispers, with silent hallways, with people too afraid to speak but too burdened to stay quiet. And here at the Righteous Report, we are a faith-based channel and we stand for truth. And if you also stand for the truth, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so more people can stay informed as this story continues to evolve, because what has erupted around Daystar is no ordinary controversy. It is the unraveling of an institution once held up as a beacon of spiritual authority, now forced into the harshest glare of public scrutiny as decades of secrets, fears, and unanswered questions finally rip their way into the open. From the moment the first anonymous account surfaced, it became clear that the Daystar narrative was shifting from isolated complaints to something far more consequential. Multiple insiders, none willing to attach their names for fear of retaliation, described a climate where dissent evaporated, not because employees had no concerns, but because concerns were met with swift, calculated punishment. These individuals painted a picture of a ministry where raising a question was treated as betrayal, and where loyalty to leadership mattered far more than truth, accountability, or even basic organizational integrity. Former staff members spoke of meetings where the atmosphere grew tense whenever someone asked for clarity on policy, finances, or ethical boundaries. It wasn't just that their questions were unwelcome. It was that asking them at all could cost a person their job, their reputation, or their future in the ministry world. One former employee, speaking under condition of anonymity, described the shift plainly. There was a season when you could walk into an office and expect transparency. That era ended. According to them and others like them, it ended abruptly, replaced by a system where only sanctioned voices were allowed to speak, and only sanitized narratives were allowed to circulate. Staff who questioned decisions were reassigned to humiliating tasks, pushed out quietly, or ostracized by colleagues afraid to be associated with them. The message was unmistakable. Speak up and risk everything, or stay silent and keep your peace. This culture of suppression did not develop overnight. Insiders say it took root slowly, growing layer upon layer as leadership began prioritizing optics over accountability. What had once been a vibrant, collaborative workplace gradually shifted into something brittle and suspicious. Employees who had devoted years, sometimes decades, of their lives to the ministry said they watched as transparency became selective, access to information became restricted, and those who knew too much suddenly found themselves on the outside looking in. Their accounts described a chilling normalization of secrecy, budgets that required explanation never explained, decisions made behind closed doors, and staff meetings where scripted positivity replaced honest dialogue. These same individuals revealed that financial impropriety, misconduct, and quiet moral failures were not anomalies but part of an ongoing pattern that insiders had learned to navigate in silence. According to several sources, allegations of misappropriated funds, unreported expenses, and questionable payouts had circulated for years, but complaints often went missing, were dismissed as misunderstandings, or were never acknowledged at all. Reports describing moral lapses or ethical breaches were buried under claims of confidentiality, or waved away as personal attacks. Employees who insisted on follow-up were labeled disloyal or accused of attacking God's work, a phrase that several insiders say became a shield against scrutiny. All of this, they claim, was justified under the guise of maintaining the network's pristine public image. Leadership allegedly believed that transparency, even when necessary, would invite public judgment, damage donors' trust, or weaken the ministry's influence. But in prioritizing reputation over truth, they created a system where real issues festered unchecked, concealed by layers of polished broadcasts and carefully curated messaging. The desire to appear spotless on camera meant that the mess behind the scenes only grew larger, darker, and more destructive. Staff described feeling trapped between their personal ethics and the expectations of their employer, forced to choose between silence and survival. What turned a long-simmering internal crisis into a public explosion was a single on-air moment, one that no one at Daystar saw coming. Joni, known for her poised delivery and unwavering composure, broke through the facade with a fiery broadcast that stunned viewers and insiders alike. Her tone was sharp, her message unfiltered, and her choice of words nothing short of seismic. She called out trespassers, a term that many interpreted as a direct indictment of those within the network who, in her view, had allowed corruption, abuse, and misconduct to thrive unchecked. The broadcast did not name names, but it didn't need to. The intensity with which she spoke, the rawness of her expression, and the timing of her language were enough to suggest that something far deeper was boiling beneath the surface. Within hours, social media erupted. Hashtags spread across platforms like wildfire. Hashtag Star Scandal, hashtag Jonum, hashtag Accountability Now. Each one carrying conversations, accusations, debates, and emotional responses from viewers who had watched Daystar for years. Some praised her for speaking boldly in a world where spiritual leaders often hide behind platitudes. Others condemned her, labeling her outburst divisive, reckless, or inflammatory. The polarized reactions revealed a community deeply split, not just over Joni's message, but over what it represented. Was she calling out wrongdoers? Was she exposing corruption that leadership had hidden for too long? Or was she worsening internal fractures and throwing gasoline on a fire that had been smoldering under the surface for years? The more people discussed it, the more stories emerged. Stories of hush money, secret settlements, and sudden disappearances of individuals who had once been central to Daystar's operations. Insiders began whispering about payouts meant to silence whistleblowers, meetings held in locked rooms at odd hours, and confidential documents never meant to see daylight. One former executive claimed that leadership had long been aware of brewing crises, but opted for cover-ups instead of corrective action. According to this source, the network had developed a strategy: protect the brand, protect the key players, and bury anything that threatens the image. These allegations aligned with rumors of boardroom battles where heated arguments erupted between executives who wanted transparency and those who insisted on secrecy for the greater good. Leaked memos, anonymously circulated emails, and vague but ominous messages began surfacing online, each adding fuel to the narrative that something was deeply wrong in the network's power structure. Several insiders admitted they had been pressured, or threatened, to remain silent. Some claimed that personal secrets were weaponized against employees who dared to challenge leadership. Others said intimidation tactics ranged from subtle isolation to explicit warnings disguised as spiritual admonitions. What made everything even more volatile was the role of language, specifically the on-air language that Joni used. Her fiery declaration stirred debates far beyond Daystar. Viewers began questioning whether her tone was appropriate for religious broadcasting, or whether it crossed into dangerous territory. Critics argued that religious platforms have a responsibility to maintain unity and calm, not incite division or fuel outrage. Supporters countered that the truth is sometimes uncomfortable and requires boldness, even at the risk of sounding harsh. The more the debate grew, the more intense it became, spreading from comment sections to forums to larger public discussions about the role of spiritual media in conflicts involving power and ethics. Meanwhile, leadership remained strikingly silent. Official statements were brief, vague, or absent altogether. Instead of quelling the situation, the silence intensified suspicion. Why wasn't anyone addressing the allegations directly? Why were no investigative steps publicly confirmed? Why did insiders keep leaking information that contradicted the official narrative? As pressure mounted, calls for an independent investigation grew louder. Viewers demanded clarity. Donors sought confirmation that their contributions were used responsibly. Former employees urged transparency for the sake of those still working inside the network. In the midst of the uproar, the scandal transformed into something much larger: a national conversation about trust, transparency, and accountability within religious media. People began examining not only Daystar but the broader ecosystem of faith-based broadcasting. How much oversight exists? How are funds managed? Who holds leaders accountable? What happens when public image becomes more important than spiritual responsibility? These questions resonated far beyond one network, sparking debates in churches, online communities, and media circles across the country. As the scandal grew, one truth became undeniable: misconduct, no matter how deeply buried, eventually comes to light. Attempts to silence critics often end up amplifying their voices. Efforts to hide wrongdoing can magnify its consequences. The Daystar saga demonstrates how fragile trust can be, and how easily it shatters when secrecy replaces honesty. In an era where information travels instantly, institutions that rely on public goodwill cannot afford to operate behind closed doors. The lessons are sharp and unavoidable. Strong language can expose corruption, but can just as easily deepen divides within a faith community. Transparency is not optional. It is foundational for any institution claiming moral authority. Cover-ups, threats, and hush money do not preserve a legacy. They destroy it. And when people demand accountability, ignoring them only ensures a larger reckoning later. In the end, this scandal is not merely about Daystar's internal turmoil. It is a reminder that every institution, no matter how influential or respected, must confront its own shortcomings with honesty and integrity. And as long as people continue speaking out, boldly, courageously, and without fear, the truth will continue to rise, no matter who tries to bury it. If you want to stay informed as this unfolding story continues, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.